So today I'm gonna teach you how to solve diagnosis cases, or in plain English, how to find your client's problems before trying to solve them. Really important. A lot of case interview questions are diagnosis cases. So let's go through what you'll learn in this lesson. First, you're gonna learn that you need to understand why a problem is happening before solving it. Really simple, common sense, but important, and a lot of candidates miss it. Second, you're going to learn that if you only treat symptoms, you did it wrong. You need to find the root causes. I'm also going to show you how to do it, how to find the real root causes of a problem. A lot of candidates find the wrong root cause, not because they went through the wrong path, but because they stopped too early. So you need to get to the real root of it. Third, you're going to learn that companies and executives are a lot like medical patients. They care about the symptoms and they hire consultants to get rid of those symptoms. They do care about the root causes, but it's not what really bothers them. It's not what drives them to hire a consulting firm. So you need to get rid of the symptoms for them. And because of the first 2 points, to do that, you need to find the root cause first. Next, I'm going to show you how to solve simple diagnosis cases. So even the simple cases have a specific technique that if you follow, bulletproofs your performance. And lastly, I'm going to teach you 5 techniques that you need to learn to help you solve even the most complex diagnosis cases. So there are 5 techniques you use to diagnose. You have to use the 5 of them, not necessarily in every case. But if you know the 5 of them, you're going to be fine for your interviews. So, first lesson, you need to diagnose before solving a problem. Imagine you go to a doctor with a strong fever and he just gives you some meds without asking any questions. How would you feel? You're probably going to feel you're not being taken care of. You're going to feel it might not work, maybe that you might die because of the fever. You're going to feel that the doctor doesn't know what he's doing, or maybe he just doesn't care about the outcome. He doesn't care if you get healthy or not. Or let's say you want to lose weight and your nutritionist, your dietitian, just tells you to eat less and exercise more. They might be right, but same thing. You're going to feel that they might be missing something important. Maybe your hormones aren't very good. Maybe you have a health problem. You're going to feel that you could have gotten the same advice from your mom or from a magazine. You're going to think, you know what? Why am I spending this much money with this professional? Both the doctor and the nutritionist or the dietitian that do that, they're right 90% of the time, but they're terrible professionals anyway. They aren't solving your problem, just a generic one. 90% is not enough when your health is at stakes. And also, when you look for a professional, you're after customized advice for your very own situation, not just generic advice you can find from a magazine or from your mom. Whenever you have a client, a consulting client, with a symptom that needs a solution, you need to find the root causes of that symptom first. You need to diagnose what's going on. This ensures first that you're going to fix the right problem. It also ensures that your client feels you care about them and that you know what you're doing. It shows you're a professional. You'd be surprised in consulting case interviews how many candidates try to solve the problem without understanding what's really going on first. Of course, these candidates get rejected because consulting firms don't want these candidates to give their clients recommendations that are too generic or that don't make sense. So diagnose before solving any problem. You need to understand the problem first, and then you can start thinking about solutions. Now, companies and executives are a lot like medical patients in the sense that they have symptoms as well. If they see that their company's health isn't going well, and they usually see those things through metrics, they care about it and they look for help. One source of help are management consultants. So, for example, if a CEO sees that his profits are evaporating, they might not know what's going on, or maybe he's scared about it and he may have some guesses, as you do with your own weight gain, but he wants a second opinion to be sure before he acts on it. Same for any executive, marketing directors, heads of operations, CTOs, you name it, they all have problems. A marketing director for a consumer goods company, for example, may be worried about the number of points of sales that carry his products. A head of operations of an electronics manufacturer may be worried about an increase in factory maintenance costs. A Silicon Valley CTO may be worried about server downtime. Management consultants are hired to solve those problems, and clients expect them to understand what's going on before seeing any solutions. Why would you think otherwise? You personally also want to know what disease you have before taking any meds, or why you're weighing so much before starting a diet. So same with executives that look for help. They want to know what's going on before seeing solutions. Every time you see an executive complaining about a quantifiable metric, treat that as a symptom. As a consultant, you want to find out why that's happening before solving it. Managers may care about metrics, usually because those relate to their bonuses. They're hired for results. But you, as a consultant, should care about underlying reasons as well, so you can help your manager, or your client in this case, reach those metrics. Let's talk a little bit about symptoms and causes. A problem in a quantifiable metric has two causes, a numerical cause and a root cause. You should be looking for the root cause. So, for example, maybe the reason you gained weight is because you increased calories consumed while not increasing expenditure through exercise. That's the numerical reason. But the real reason why you gained weight is that you're so anxious with personal issues, you're binge eating sweets. If you don't find that cause, the root cause, recommending eating less is pointless. So same for companies. Maybe a company that produces lighters is losing profits because their volume is shrinking. That's the numerical reason. But the real reason they're losing lighters, for example, is that people are not smoking anymore in their country. So always look for the root cause. But to find the root cause, you need to find the numerical cause first by breaking the problem as an issue tree. Before asking the weight gaining patient if they're anxious, it makes sense to know if they're eating more, exercising less, or if they have a hormonal problem. Same for the lighter company. If the problem is clearly on costs, it doesn't make sense to suppose people have stopped smoking. Using issue trees to separate the problem before you ask the real reasons, the root causes, the qualitative reasons, helps you being super focused. So you need the numerical causes first, but then you need to find the root cause. And to do that, you need to ask why enough times until you understand the problem. For the weight gaining patient, for example, why are you eating more? Well, because I'm anxious. Why are you anxious? Well, because I'm going through personal problems. So if you ask why, you get to the root of it. Let's give an example with the lighters company. Well, why is the volume shrinking? Well, because less people are buying lighters. That can be numerical still, less people, you could do number of people. But why are people buying less lighters? Well, because they've stopped smoking. And why is that? Well, because people are more conscious about health and the problem that smoking brings them, for example. If you ask why, you get to the root causes, the qualitative issues that drive the numbers. Now, let me walk you through a very simple example. An example that you could find in a case interview, although it's simpler than most case interviews. Let's say a local pizza restaurant has seen a decrease in profits, and they want to know why that happened. How would I conduct this case? Well, first, we need to see if revenues have dropped or if fixed or variable costs have gone up. So I'd present this structure to the interviewer and ask them, do we know if revenues have dropped or if fixed or variable costs have gone up? Let's say they say, well, revenues have dropped. Oh, okay, cool. So if it's a restaurant, I want to break down revenues into meals per week, have meals per week dropped, or if the ticket per meal has dropped. Let's say they tell me, well, meals per week have dropped. Okay, so is there less demand? Or is it a problem that there is demand, but we can't serve these meals for some reason? See how I break down this problem in a very structured way, in a very messy way, and I only dig deeper into the parts of the problem that are parts of the problem. So I'm not digging costs. I'm not breaking down costs because the interviewer has told me, usually with data, but sometimes just telling, that the problem is not on costs. So is there less demand, or is it that we can't serve demand for some reason? Let's say they tell me, well, there's less demand. Okay, I'm gonna break this down into, are people not eating pizza anymore, or are less people eating pizza, or are people eating less pizza, or if people are eating pizza at another restaurant. Let's say they tell me, well, they're eating pizza at another restaurant. I'm gonna ask them, is it a new restaurant or an old restaurant? So a restaurant that was already there, and for some reason people are switching from our restaurant to our old competitor. Let's say the interviewer tells me, well, those are people going to the new restaurant. Okay, so I think I understand now. We're losing profits because people that used to eat at our restaurant are eating pizza at another restaurant that just opened up. Now, I want to understand why this is happening. So my first question would be, why are customers switching to this new competitor? Let's say the interviewer tells me, well, they're switching because they want to try it. It's a new restaurant, it just opened, so the regular customers want to try the new options around. Okay, cool. Now, my next question would be, do customers keep going there after the first visit? This is actually what I asked the interviewer. Notice how there's a hypothesis behind this question, which is, well, maybe they're just trying and they will come back. And I got this hypothesis because the interviewer used the word try. So I'm gonna test it. Let's say the interviewer answers, no, they always come back to ours. So the customer will go there once, maybe twice, but then they come back to our restaurant. And then I'm gonna ask them, well, why do they come back to our restaurant? Of course, I have a hypothesis in mind that our restaurant is better, but I want to test it. I want to know why. Let's say they answer me, well, they like it better, they like our restaurant better, and it fits their budget, while the other pizza is too expensive for regular eating. Okay, so my conclusion here, what I would tell the interviewer is, okay, I think I know what's going on. I think this client, this local pizza restaurant, had a short-term profit decrease because of a new competitor that got their customers' business. But I think this local pizza restaurant doesn't need to worry too much. Their profits are likely to return to normality because their pizza is better and cheaper in their customers' eyes. But I'd still recommend this pizza restaurant to watch their competitors' next moves closely, because if they have a competitor now and they decide to drop their prices or improve pizza quality, that might put our client, our pizza restaurant, at risk. This is a very simple example of a diagnostics case. I go drilling deeper at where the problem is to find new information. You can see in the issue tree, these are things that are logical. It's either one or the other. And I use this to ask my interviewer what happened. Then, once I reach to a point that I can't really break it down anymore, then I ask why, because I want to get to the root of it. The root in this case was that they're trying it, but maybe the problem would be another one. Maybe our clients don't really like our restaurant. Maybe we take too much time to serve, and these are people that are working in corporate offices nearby. Maybe the other guy's pizza is amazing. I didn't know why until I asked. And that's what you do in a consulting project. You ask your customers, you ask your client, you ask your databases. So this is a very simple example. I got to the root cause of the problem, and I'm not giving recommendations yet because the scope of this case was to understand why profits are decreasing. So I've talked over and over again that that problem was simple. Now I want to talk about how to deal with a more complex situation. There are three things that may make the situation more complex to solve. Life is not all rainbows and unicorns, and I'm sorry, but no consultant ever was hired to solve a problem that simple. Although you'd be surprised how many candidates can't solve that problem of the pizza restaurant well and efficiently. Anyway, first factors. The answers to your questions may not be as clear as the ones that I gave to myself in that example. For example, maybe revenues decrease and costs have gone up. Or maybe none of them changed and your client wants improvement anyway. How do you prioritize between revenues and costs if you don't have the trend or if they haven't changed at all? You need to do that. Numbers are your friends. Use them. You can size what drove the problem the most and what didn't make a difference at all. And let's say you don't have a trend or numbers are flat, you can use benchmarks. So in a more complex scenario, the interviewer won't tell you, well, the problem is on revenues or the problem is on market share, but rather they're going to give you numbers and you have to interpret them. You have to ask for the numbers as well, so be sure to ask for the right ones. Second factor, some businesses are more complex. Let's say we're talking about Pizza Hut instead of a local pizza place. A new competitor down the road won't make sense as a question, but the entry of a new player in the west coast of USA will. If the business is complex, trying a few segmentation patterns may work. Was the revenue decrease only in a certain region, in certain age groups? Those things help you gather context and find the answer quicker. Third factor, interrelated variables may change due to the same cause. Let's say because of less meals, variable costs could have gone up due to a loss in negotiation power. So what I'm saying here is the guy with the pizza restaurant has to pay more for cheese because he's getting less of it. So if you ask if revenues have decreased or costs have increased, interviewer might say, well, both. Have the discipline to understand one cause before the other. That's what being systematic means. And you can use the numbers to judge which cause is more relevant than the other. But to use a Chinese proverb here, the man who chases two rabbits catches neither. So go for the larger cause first, understand the why of it, and then, only then, if you feel the need, you can chase the other one. So in this case, go after revenue decrease, and then you can understand why costs have gone up. That should be simple, huh? Costs have gone up because you pay more for cheese, and you pay more for cheese because revenues are down or volume is down. So in this case, it's simple. In other cases, it can get a bit more complex, but the catch here is go for one metric first, then try to understand the others, if there is more than one thing changing at once. Let's now talk about a more complex example. We've been through the three things that make a case more complex. Now let's see how a real diagnostics case may look like in your typical case interview. This could be a partner level McKinsey or Bain or BCG interview. It wouldn't be a hard one, but it could be one. Let's say your interviewer asks you to figure out why has the BIC lighters division seen a profit decrease. So BIC, that makes lighters, let's say their profits have decreased in a country and they want to know why. First three questions that I'd ask: which country is this? By how much has the profit decreased? And in what time frame? So is it a profit decrease last month, last year, past 5 years? So those are the three questions I'd ask. Super important to ask for context. Let's say they tell me it's in a random small Latin American country. The profit decrease happened last year and it went from $3 million to $2 million. So that larger than signal there is supposed to be an arrow. Anyway, okay, I'd say cool. So 3 million to 2 million, that's a lot of profit decrease. We've lost 33% of our profits. And what it asks now is, has revenue dropped or have fixed or variable costs increased? These are the questions that I'd ask. Let's say the interviewer tells me, well, both happened at the same time. Revenues have dropped and costs overall have increased. My next step, my next move is to ask, well, by how much? I want to see if the problem is mainly in revenues or mainly in costs. So I actually explain to the interviewer what am I doing. I don't just ask by how much. I could have done that, but I explain to show my reasoning. They want to know how I reason through the problem. In this case, they tell me, well, revenues have dropped from $3.9 million to $3 million. Yeah, I just noticed this is a huge profit margin, so probably unlikely that these are the real numbers. But anyway, let's work with these numbers. Revenues have dropped from $3.9 million to $3 million. Okay, so what I tell here is I see that revenues have dropped by $900,000, which means that our costs have increased by $100,000. So we can get a $1 million profit decrease. So I'm going to explore revenues first. If revenues have dropped, my guess is that we're either selling less lighters, or we're charging less on each lighter, or the mix of lighter types have changed. So we used to sell the big lighters and now we're selling the small lighters. That gives us a smaller profit margin. Let's say the interviewer tells me, well, we're selling less lighters. What could be going on? What I'm telling them now is, well, either the market is down or we lost market share. And my hypothesis is that we've lost market share because I don't see the lighter market losing 25% in size in just 1 year. So I use context to hypothesize the most likely option, but I show both. Interviewer will tell me, you're right, we've lost market share. What could be going on now? And I'm going to tell you, well, maybe we've reduced the number of points of sales that are selling big lighters, or we've lost share on same POS. So we didn't change the points of sales, we're selling lighters, we're just selling less lighters per point of sale. Notice that I'm breaking down market share in a way that makes sense for this business. Almost no candidate does that. If you do this, you're ahead of 98% of candidates who just memorize frameworks and can't do this, can't break down market share for a lighter business, for example. Let's say the interviewer tells me, well, we have the same number of points of sale selling big. My conclusion is that we've lost share on same points of sale. And then my new breakdown here is that we're either losing share to old products, so to products that were in the market 1 year ago, or we're losing share to a new product. Let's say at this point the interviewer tells me, yes, you're right. What has happened is that a new product was launched by a competitor and we're losing share of lighters to this new product. My next move here is, okay, I want to understand why. Why are customers buying the new product? Because I want to get to the root cause of the problem. Let's say the interviewer tells me, well, they prefer the look and feel of it. So they prefer the product. If we were in a solutions-driven case, so what should BIC do? Then I try to understand what can we do here, what are our options, and analyze those, and then choose one, which is what we'll do in a profitability case. If you watch our profitability case video, you're gonna see that. But because we're in a diagnosis case, I could end here and say, well, the major reason why the big lighters division has seen a profit decrease in this country last year is that a new competitor product was introduced in the market, and our customers are preferring, or some of our customers are preferring this new product. But I want to understand costs first, because I think it's really strange that our costs have raised while our volume has dropped. The opposite should happen. So I tell the interviewer that, the main reason is this new product was launched, but I want to understand why costs have raised. I'd expect costs to go down. Could you tell me more about costs? Let's say the interviewer tells me, well, our fixed costs were increased by $300,000. What I'm going to tell the interviewer now is, okay, that makes sense. Total costs have increased by $100,000. This means that variable costs have gone down by $200,000, which makes sense given that volume is lower now. Do we know which fixed costs have increased by that much? And let's say the interviewer, they could ask me what are the fixed costs in this business, or they can just tell me, well, let's say marketing costs have increased. Now I can ask, well, why are we spending more on marketing? When I ask this question, they can give me back a brainstorming question and tell me, well, what do you think? What are reasons why we could be spending more on marketing? Or they can just tell me the answer. Usually they will do a brainstorming question here. But let's say they just give me the answer, well, we're spending more on marketing as a reaction to this new product. My answer to this is, well, big lighters have seen a profit decrease because a competitor has introduced a new product, and many customers prefer that product over our product. We've made the profit decrease worse by spending more on marketing. And I don't know exactly the timing of this expenditure, but it seems not to be working because our revenue hasn't ramped up again. So we probably need to find something else to do to recover profits instead of just spending more money on marketing. But I need to check that with more analysis. That's my answer to the case. So a lot more complex than the first one, but the technique is roughly the same. Let's then talk about these techniques. There are 5 techniques and habits you regularly use to diagnose: issue trees, comparisons between numbers, segmentations, gathering context, and asking why. Master using these techniques at the right times in your case by practicing and getting feedback from people who understand this material, either from crafting cases or another source. So let's go into each one of these 5 techniques and habits. First, use issue trees to break down the problem. They separate what is happening from what is not happening. Right? If you have a profit problem, it's either revenue or costs. If you have a Salesforce productivity problem, it's either in the productive time that they can't do anything, or they have too much non-productive time. So use issue trees to break down these problems. Issue trees will help you know where the problem is coming from. It's like knowing if you've gained weight by problems in your diet, exercise, hormones, or a combination of 2 or the 3 factors. So if you know where the problem comes from, it's easier to know why it's happening. You can use issue trees for that. Second technique, compare the number against the past or against benchmarks to understand if it's part of the problem or not. Sizing and comparing numbers helps you evaluate where the problem actually comes from without needing to trust others' opinions. You form your own opinion as a consultant should do. So in some cases, the interviewers won't give you the data. They'll just tell you where the problem comes from. But in real life situations, and preferably in case interviews as well, you always ask for data. And because no number by itself means anything, you need to compare it either against the past or against benchmarks that could come from competition or even internal benchmarks. So let's say you have a factory, you can compare its performance with another factory from the same company. Third technique, segment the number to understand if the cause is widespread or not. I didn't do that in the last case, but I could have asked if the problem comes from a certain region of the country, a certain type of store, a certain type of client. In this case, I didn't feel the need to, but I could have. So, for example, which customers are switching from our lighter to the new product launched by our competitors? Maybe it's only young clients. So segmenting helps you gather a bit more context and know better where the problem comes from. Segmenting does not substitute issue trees, however. So if you need to choose one, just choose issue trees. But if you can use both at once, you'll get more powerful in your problem solving. You're going to do it quicker and get to more insight. Next technique, gather context as you go to help you solve the case. So I've gathered context in the beginning of the case by asking which country is it and by how much has profit decreased, but also while I was solving it. This is important. It shows curiosity. It shows that you're not a robot. And it also happens to help a lot in real life. The more context you have about your client, the easier it gets to understand their problems. And this is probably the main reason why most consultants do their projects in the client sites, not just from their own offices, because they need to get context from the client and understand where does that organization come from. Why do they do things like they do? Finally, ask why after you've gotten to the numerical cause. The root cause is always qualitative. The reason why the root cause is always qualitative is because things happen because of people. Your clients' competitors, the customers, the distribution channels, because these people change their behavior. Because your clients, your competitors, your customers, the distribution channel change their behavior, this has an effect in the numbers. So in the last case, it has an effect in profits through a change in revenues, through a change in market share. But the numbers are just symptoms. The causes are what people do in real life. So the causes of BIC losing profit, in that case, it's a hypothetical case by the way, is that when customers are about to shop for lighters, they end up choosing their competitors' products instead of BIC's. So it's always decisions made by real people. It's always qualitative. Now you have all you need to do diagnosis cases, but some of you may be wondering what happens after you diagnose. Well, two things can happen. One is that some diagnosis cases end at diagnose. That's logical, but basically you get to the reason why something is happening, and the interviewer will just tell you, great job, that's the answer. And we've seen partners from McKinsey, Bain, BCG doing it. Julio got one case like that at a final round at Bain, so it can happen. It happens sometimes. But most times, other interviewers will ask you to solve the problem. So if the problems were profit, that would be a profitability case. So after you find out why BIC's profits have gone down, interviewers say, well, what should they do about it? And they turn this diagnosis case into a profitability case because the symptom was on profits. But let's say if the symptom was on market share, it could be a increasing market share case. It doesn't matter. But basically you found the problem, the root of the problem, and some interviewers will ask you to solve this problem. And to do that, you should use the techniques that we teach on profitability cases. They work for other metrics as well. It doesn't have to be profits. But being very concise here, after you find out very specifically what's the problem, what's the root cause of the problem, you lay out options on what you can do via brainstorming. Then you prioritize between those options, the ones that makes most sense, and you develop analysis to validate and test the hypothesis of which option makes most sense. And once you find the best option, you recommend your clients that they should be doing something. So that's basically how you solve a profitability case. We have that in much more detail in a profitability case video. So thank you for asking this. I hope it was useful for you. Whenever you find a symptom in a client, you should diagnose it. And I hope this video was helpful for you to understand why you should diagnose and how you should diagnose. Now, of course, you need to get practice on this. So ask people around to do profitability cases or cases where you have to diagnose something. A lot of candidates won't know what a diagnosis cases is. Actually, we've developed this terminology, but if you ask for a profitability case, you always have a diagnosis phase in the beginning. So get to practice, try to apply these techniques and habits that we've spoken about in this video and improve your technique on solving these cases. It's very useful, very common among partners at McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and any rounds in other firms. Thank you so much and have a great practice.